If you're trying to conceive and quietly wondering if life can be whole without a baby, feeling anxious, uncertain, or weary in your faith, you're not alone. Welcome to the Infertility and Trying to Conceive podcast for Christian women. I'm Lyndell Renee, an Aussie wife, mum, and follower of Jesus. Here I share biblical truth, simple conception tips, offer emotional support, and have honest conversations about what struggling to conceive really looks like as a Christian woman. My prayer is that this podcast lightens your load, keeps you anchored in Christ, and helps you move forward with confidence, peace, and hope. Christ goes before you, and I'm right here helping you look to Him every step of the way. Let's begin. Watching someone else's pregnancy while you're really wanting to be pregnant too can be really rough. And I want to start just by saying that if that's your situation right now, the heaviness you carry, it's valid, especially if the person who's pregnant is close to you. Or even if they're not, your reaction might surprise you. And you might find yourself feeling different than you expected. You might have thought that you'd feel happier for them. And part of you probably still is happy for them. But at the same time, other feelings like sadness or frustration or even a tinge of envy might sit below the surface or even rise up, and they can sometimes be stronger than you'd expect. I know I'd feel uncomfortable or even a bit guilty for having feelings that were anything but joy or happiness for my friends who got pregnant, as though I shouldn't be feeling that way towards my friends. And I think another thing that can be quite upsetting is that often you don't get to choose when or how you find out about someone else's pregnancy. I remember a moment like this really clearly. I was at an event one night and I just picked up my phone to check the time, and then a Facebook post appeared on my screen, and it was one of my closest friends announcing her third pregnancy. I got no message beforehand, no heads up, just there it was, and I wasn't ready for it. It felt like I'd been slapped in the face. I remember just staring at the screen for a second and not even processing really, and I wasn't ready for it. I'd felt like I'd just been slapped in the face. I remember just staring at the screen for a second, not even really processing it, just trying to catch up with what I was looking at. And then all the feelings can hit at once. You see their news, and then your mind starts racing. You think about them, then straight to yourself, how long this journey has been for you, everything you've been through, where you thought you'd be by now. And all these feelings happen really quickly. And so that's the first thing I just want to say. That first reaction, the one that almost knocks the wind out of you, that's not a character flaw. That's just what it feels like when someone lands in the middle of a wound that's already there. But feeling upset about someone else's pregnancy, it's not just about your initial reaction. You might close the app and you might go about your day, but then later you open it again and the post is still there. Someone else might have shared it, there's more comments on it, just more little reminders. And each time you feel the sting again. Maybe not as strong as when you first saw it, but it's still there. And that starts to weigh you down, not just the news itself, but the way it keeps finding you when you weren't looking for it. And when you're in that place, how you react usually lands in the middle of everything else that you've been carrying. Months of waiting, maybe even years. Appointments and blood work, 2-week waits, and grief that you've had to keep quiet because not everyone knows what's going on. So when a friend or a sister or someone you know gets pregnant, it doesn't just happen in this neutral space. It lands in the middle of all that pain and the grief that you've been carrying. And your reaction makes complete sense in that context. And I think this is where it helps to be realistic too, because some people are able to pause before they respond. And if that's you, that can really help. But if that's not doable for you in the moment, that's okay too. I think most of the time your initial reaction isn't something that you just carefully choose. It happens instantly. And if you're hearing the news in person from someone, you might not have time to process things easily right in that moment. So when someone close to you tells you that they're pregnant, especially a sister or a best friend, your feelings can be all over the shop. Part of you is happy for them. You love them. You want good things for them. But at the same time, there can be another part of you that just, drops. It feels heavy and hollow. And that can happen at the exact same time. Because it's not just about what you're feeling. It's also about how your response lands on them. Especially with someone close like a sister. Your reaction matters to them. They're watching your face and they're hoping that you're just as excited for them as what they are for themselves. And yet at the same time, you're standing there trying to hold yourself together. So there's this tension. You don't want to fake it, but you also don't want to hurt them. And I think this is where it helps to separate the two things, your feelings and your response. Your feelings might be all over the place in that moment. And that's not something you can control instantly. But your response, even if it's simple, can be shaped by what you know is good and right. So in that moment, you don't need to overcomplicate it. You can just keep it simple. Something like, congratulations, I'm really happy for you, or that's really special news. And you might be thinking to yourself, but I don't fully feel that. And I get that. But here's the key. You can say something that is true in what you want for them, even if your emotions haven't yet caught up. You do want good things for your sister or your friend. You do care about her. That's real, even if it's sitting right alongside your grief. So you're not being fake. You're choosing to respond in a way that reflects love, even while you're carrying some hard emotions underneath. And then later, when you can deal with the rest of what's going on in you, not in the moment and not in front of them where possible, but when you've got space to actually think. And I also want to just acknowledge that it can be really exhausting when you're carrying so much with infertility, and then you feel like you've also got to manage other people's emotions and feelings and reactions on top of that. And in one sense, it's true. You are having to think about someone else in a moment where you're often feeling maxed out yourself. But as Christians, we're not just guided by what feels easiest in the moment. We're also shaped by love, a steady, others-focused kind of love. And that doesn't mean that you have to ignore your pain. It doesn't mean that you have to pretend everything is fine. But in that moment, you can choose not to make your reaction the center of their news. And I absolutely know that is hard. But it is a way of loving them well without denying what's happening for you. But I know for me, oftentimes, you can get some guilt attached to that. The feeling of, but I should feel fully happy for them. And that's often coming from the idea that your emotions should be simple, but they're not. You can love your sister deeply and still feel the weight of your own situation at the exact same time. Those things don't cancel each other out. So after the initial shock of everything settles, it can help to put words to what's going on. And that might just be something simple like acknowledging that this feels harder than I expected. Or if you can be more specific, just name the emotions. I feel sad, I feel jealous, I feel upset. Putting words to it, even roughly, it helps you understand what you're actually dealing with. And I think it also reduces your likelihood to judge yourself in a harsher way than you might normally. Because instead of thinking, things like, what's wrong with me? You're actually recognizing, yeah, this is hard. And that acknowledgement, I think it can remove a little part of the burden. And so once you've named what's going on, something else that can be helpful is to look at what you're thinking. Because your thoughts don't just stay in your head, they lead somewhere. Your initial reaction, whatever it is, isn't the full picture of what's going on in you. It doesn't mean everything your mind is saying in that moment is actually true. Your thoughts in that moment tend to move really quickly. Things like, this is never going to happen for me, or God's giving this to everyone else but not me, or I'm going to be left behind and I'm going to miss out on the life that I thought I would have. These things might pop into your head immediately. You might feel upset or envious or just flat, and all of that is understandable. And we'll go deeper on some of those feelings in future episodes. But for now, what matters is this. If those thoughts just sit there unchecked, they grow. And they can affect how you carry yourself through the rest of the day. And they can affect how you respond to your friend and to others and how you see God. I know when my mind is anxious, especially when I'm waiting for an answer to something, I can get a bit snappy and take it out on those closest to me. And usually my husband gets the brunt of it. So it is worth slowing down and looking at your thoughts. You don't need to police them and beat yourself up over any negative thought that just comes into your mind, because your mind thinks just as your heart beats. You can't stop your thoughts. God designed our brains to think, but the meaning that you give those thoughts does matter. So it's worth asking, is what I'm telling myself here, is the story that I'm telling myself or the narrative, is it actually true? And it's not just what feels true right now, but what is actually true. And this is where you can hold two things carefully. We do see in the Bible that God can work in situations that look completely impossible. Even if those stories aren't guarantees that the exact same thing will happen for us, they show what God is capable of. So the aim isn't to try and force hope or convince yourself that everything will work out a certain way. It's clinging to what God has said in His Word that gives you true, soul-satisfying hope. And it's also not believing the hopeless thoughts that might run through your mind. Ones that tell you that you'll never have a baby or that you'll never be happy in life if you don't become a mum. The devil can have a field day with discouragement. So rather than allowing him to do that, you're aiming to think clearly based on what is true. Another helpful shift you can make is instead of trying to handle everything perfectly in the moment, you can start adjusting what you're regularly exposed to. And this might look like, limiting social media, stepping back from certain conversations, spacing out events, choosing who you spend time with, and just planning quieter days after harder ones. This is about working with your capacity and not pushing through everything and just stuffing down your pain. I do think one of the hardest parts is actually social media, because you don't get to control when things appear. You can be having a completely normal morning and then you're scrolling and suddenly, you see a scan photo or an update or a gender reveal and you feel ambushed. So if you need permission to step back from that from a season, then here it is. You can delete the app for a while. You can mute people. You can unfollow accounts. And you can set a time limit on how long you scroll. And this doesn't mean that you don't care about your friend. It doesn't mean that you're not happy for them. It just means that you're choosing when and how often you're exposed to something that's already really hard for you right now. You don't have to watch her pregnancy unfold in real time on your phone at 10 p.m. at night. And another place I think it can be hard as well is just general conversations. Someone might start talking about their pregnancy or trying for another baby or their kids, and you might just walk away feeling like you've been hit by a bus. And it's not always because of what they say, but more how it lands for you. So if that happens, just pay attention to it. Just noticing that conversation was actually harder than I expected can stop it from quietly building up in the background. From there, you've got a few options. You could change the subject next time, or keep the conversation shorter. You might even step away earlier, or just limit how often you're in those conversations with those particular people. And you might start to notice patterns with certain people or in certain settings. Being aware of these things can help you think ahead instead of being caught off guard every time. And this is where it also might help to have boundaries, because having them in place allows you to work with the capacity that you have in your life right now. I also want to say something about what you might have heard called a heads up request. The idea is that you ask your friends to tell you privately about any baby news before making a public announcement, just so you know that you're not blindsided. And that can work really well with the right person in the right friendship. It's a kind and thoughtful thing, but it's also complicated, because people don't always share that they're trying for a baby. It's often private, a reality that you might wish that you could have had, but infertility often wrecks that. So your friend might not even know that this is something that you'd want until after it's already happened. She might not tell you that they've been trying because she doesn't want to add pressure to you or hurt you, and she might be unsure how you'll even react. She also might be hoping that you'll get pregnant before she does, and so that she doesn't actually have to tell you first. But you won't always get a warning from people. But if you do have a close enough relationship and it feels appropriate, you could say something like, "Hey, I just want to be honest. Hearing pregnancy news can sometimes hit me harder than I expect. If you feel comfortable giving me a quiet heads up first, I'd really appreciate it." That gives them the option without pressure. And even if they don't always get it right, you've been clear. And this won't always be something that you can set up in advance. So part of this is also learning how to handle these moments that you don't always see coming. Not everyone will get all the complexities of what you're navigating with infertility and loss, and that can be hard. Some people will say things that miss the mark, even if they mean well. But it does help to have a few people who understand. Being around people who get what you're navigating can be one of the most practical things you can do, because not everyone will get it. Even those who care about you deeply might not fully get how this feels for you. And again, that's where support groups or even just one or two trusted people can help make a difference. It can help you feel less alone when you don't have to explain everything all the time. I think there's a sense of relief about being around people who already understand how hard this can be. And that matters more than it might seem, because this usually isn't a one-off moment. If infertility goes on for a long time, these situations don't disappear. You might still have moments like this again and again, and they can still feel heavy. but having the right support around you can change how we move through these moments. It doesn't make the situation easy, and it doesn't mean the pain disappears quickly, but what it can change is how much it takes over you. Instead of hitting you and staying with you for the rest of the day, you can start recognizing what's happening sooner. You can start having something to fall back on when it hits. You make small decisions that actually support you instead of leaving you more overwhelmed. And you can start reminding yourself of what's true, including what God says in His Word, instead of just believing whatever your thoughts or feelings are telling you in that moment. This can gradually shift things to where you can carry infertility and loss without it completely undoing you. If you've had a painful reaction like this before, you're not the first and certainly won't be the last. Many of us have found that our reactions to other people's pregnancies are harder than we expected. This is genuinely hard, but there are ways to handle it that don't leave you feeling completely undone every time it happens. And so that's what I hope you might have got from this episode today. It's not about removing the pain, but helping you navigate it in a way that's steady, practical, and actually sustainable. And staying connected to what's true about who God is and who He says you are, even when the feelings are loud and the grief is real. That's what we're building towards. Thanks for listening, and please go gentle with yourself this week. Bye. Before you go, thank you so much for listening. I pray today's episode has brought you fresh hope for whatever comes next. If someone comes to mind today who could truly use support in this space, please share this episode or the podcast with them. It might be exactly what they need. And if you could take 30 seconds to give me a star rating or leave 1 or 2 sentences about what this podcast has meant to you on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I'd be ever so grateful. Your feedback not only helps others find the podcast, but it truly makes my day. And words of affirmation are my love language. And if you're not sure how to do that, I'll pop the links in the show notes below. Lastly, although I do have a nursing degree, everything shared in this podcast is for inspiration and education only. Please don't use it as a replacement for advice from your personal, medical, or mental health professional. There's absolutely no shame in getting additional support when you need it, but always consult your expert team before making any changes to your fertility journey. That's all from me today. Take care, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.